Hey, fourth grade, welcome back to another wonderful day of learning. Today we're going to be jumping into DCPS packet week number 3. And specifically, we're going to be going over days 1, 2, and 3 of that packet. So go ahead and grab yours. We'll jump in and get started. All right, here we go. So those are the objectives for the first 3 days, and we'll cover each of those as we begin going over the information for that day. So for day 1, this is the chart you're going to be working from. You're going to read the 2 articles, but before you do that, you're going to jot down what you already know about women before and during the American Revolution. Then we're also going to be using some of our question words to come up with 4 questions that we are going to look for evidence for in those 2 texts. All right. And our questions should be based around the focus question, which is how should women, including African American and Native American women, be remembered for their contributions to the fight for independence? All right, so objective for day 1 says you will read multiple informational texts to begin research on your opinion writing topic. So the things that I came up with for what I know about women before and during the American Revolution were: 1, I know that women weren't allowed to vote. And I also know from the previous text that women boycotted British goods. Now, as far as what I want to know about this topic, the 4 questions that I came up with were: 1, how did women's roles change during the American Revolution? How did women show their support for freedom during the American Revolution? Who were some of the women who made contributions to the American Revolution? And lastly, how have women been recognized and honored for their contributions to the American Revolution? Okay. So once you guys create your 4 questions, you'll pause the video here and then you'll go over and you will read the 2 texts, which is Just Say No and Remember the Ladies, okay? Now, if you would like to, you can go over and watch Miss Rose read aloud of both of those texts, okay? But this is the point in the video when you need to pause if you have not read these texts. You're going to read them, create your 4 questions first, read the 2 texts, and then come back before you move on to day 2, all right? Cool. So day 2's objective says you will reread and annotate the articles Just Say No and Remember the Ladies to identify key details. We want to make sure that we are looking for evidence that supports our answers to the questions that we created on day 1. We also want to make sure that our evidence that we find answers the focus question, all right? So day 2, since we're annotating, we need to make sure that we remember how to annotate. We're going to underline major points, circle keywords and phrasings, put question marks beside things that maybe we want to know more about. And then we also can write margin notes over in the space to the sides of the article, okay? So for question number 1, how did women's roles change during the American Revolution? So in the first text, Just Say No, I found this evidence. For the first time, many women found a political voice. Some wrote letters and poems about politics, sending them anonymously to local newspapers. In the second article, Remember the Ladies, I found this piece of evidence. Often women took on non-traditional roles during the American Revolution. Many served the armies as soldiers and spies. Both of these pieces of evidence answer my question: how did women's roles change during the American Revolution? Question number 2 says, how did women show their support for freedom during the American Revolution? Well, in the first text, I found this piece of evidence that says many women, among them those calling themselves Daughters of Liberty, agreed to boycott British goods to protest the Stamp Act. These women These women refused to use British cloth to make their clothes. Some women even refused to get married if their fiancés applied for a marriage license with a stamp. Interesting. The second article gave me this piece of evidence. Women often followed their husbands to war. It was a hard life, but they did so to keep families together and safe. All right, so that's question number 2. Let's move on to question number 3. So for question number 3, it was very difficult to find any evidence from the first article. So I went ahead and grabbed 3 pieces of evidence from the second article. The question is, who were some of the women who made contributions to the American Revolution? The article gave me people like Margaret Corbin, who took over her husband's cannon after he was killed during the war. Mary Ludwig Hayes, she also took her husband's place at a cannon after he was wounded at the Battle of Monmouth. And then the third lady that contributed to the American Revolution was Deborah Sampson. And she disguised herself as Robert Shirtliff and enlisted in the 4th Massachusetts Regiment in 1788. So those are 3 really good pieces of evidence from that second article that give me specific women who made contributions to the American Revolution. The fourth and final question is, how have women been recognized and honored for their contributions to the American Revolution? Once again, there wasn't a lot of evidence from the first article that would have helped me answer this question, so I just grabbed evidence from the second article. The second article has a couple of pieces of evidence. The first one says, however, in 1981, the US Congress passed a resolution that established National Women's History Week. Congress changed the resolution to a month-long event in 1987. And ever since, presidential proclamation has declared March as Women's History Month. And I wanted to make sure that I circled those 2 years as well. The second piece of evidence says in 1822, the state of Pennsylvania awarded her a pension, not for her husband's service, but her own. So once again, we see one specific lady who was awarded for her service during the war. Okay, and once again, I also circled the date there. All right, so now that we have annotated and we've gathered our evidence, now it's time to write our evidence down in our chart for day 3. We're going to use and organize the notes that we gathered from reading and rereading both articles. So the first question that we gathered evidence for was, how did women's roles change during the American Revolution? And in the first text, we said that women began to have a political voice by writing letters and poems about politics to newspapers. And also many women became soldiers and spies. For question number 2, how did women show their support for freedom during the American Revolution? The first article told us that women boycotted British goods. And in the second article, we found out that some women followed their husbands to war to keep families together. Third question, who were some of the women who made contributions? Remember, we talked about the ladies in the second article. Remember the ladies? Margaret Corbin, Mary Ludwig Hayes, and Deborah Sampson. Those were just a few women who made contributions. And then question number 4, how have women been recognized and honored for their contributions? In the second article, it tells us that US Congress established Women's History Month in 1987. Okay. Now, as far as other interesting facts, things that I found very interesting in that first text were that women made their own tea using different leaves and flowers. Of course, they did that because they didn't want to use any goods that came from Great Britain. And in the second text, what I found that was interesting was that children even helped during the war by collecting wood and carrying messages. There were other things that they did as well, but I just found that was really interesting. And so last but not least, they want us to summarize what we've learned. So basically they're asking us, what were both texts mainly about? And so what I did, I used my question words to come up with this summary. I said that women made many contributions during the American Revolution by boycotting and working on or near the battlefield. So that's kind of what both texts were showing us. They made contributions and then the specific ways that they contributed um, during the American Revolution. Okay, so that ends our DCPS packet week number 3, days 1, 2, and 3. So make sure you come back tomorrow so that we can plan and draft and publish our projects. Okay? All right. See you guys.